Welcome to the Leadership Corner. My name is Ki Liu and I am the Executive Director for Tulane University's Disaster Resilience Leadership Academy. It is my privilege to welcome Moazzam Malik to the Leadership Corner. Moazzam is currently the Director of the UN Conflict and Humanitarian Issues Unit within the United Kingdom's Department for International Development. In this capacity, Moazzam leads the British government's efforts to build the capacity of the United Nations Development and Humanitarian System. Moazzam also works to ensure that the British government's humanitarian assistance program is effective and timely and supports vulnerable populations impacted by conflict and insecurity. The following interview took place in Moazzam's office, and I hope that you will find it as insightful and informative as I did. Thank you. Moazzam, welcome to the Leadership Corner.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Moazzam, I first met you back in 2006 at the pledging conference for the United Nations Central Emergency Response Fund,
Yes.
Where you were the British delegate and I was representing the United States, and we were sitting next to each other. And I still remember to this day a statement you made while announcing the British government's very generous pledge to the surf. If I may paraphrase, you noted your children's future and how it would be positively impacted from what we were doing collectively to strengthen the humanitarian system. Is this what motivates you to continue working in this field?
Yes, it is. As you can see, I'm originally from South Asia. I was born and grew up in Britain, but my personal background has always meant that I've been very, very aware of the life circumstances of people around the world. It's an accident of family history that I come to have grown up in Britain and had all the opportunities that I've had. Mm-hmm. And when I look at my children and I look at children when I travel abroad, they're children, and I want them to have the same opportunities. And that really motivates my interest in development. In terms of the humanitarian side, you generously recall the statement I made at the surf. And I think the point I was making was really that if a calamity struck us personally and affected our children, how would we want the international community to respond? Mm-hmm. to save our children's lives, to meet the needs of our children? And if one applies that yardstick and we think about it in terms of our own children, it brings an urgency and a drive and a directness to what we expect that sometimes is missing when one talks about international agencies and the alphabet soup of the development business or the humanitarian business. And the point that I was trying to make really was that this is vital. It matters, it saves lives, it affects lives. It affects life chances, and we need to bring that kind of urgency and drive and directness to our work, and that's why I posed it in those terms, and that is indeed what motivates me day in, day out.
Your academic training is in economics, and early in your career at DFID, you were focused on trade policy, migration, and development. What prompted you to enter into this field of conflict and humanitarian assistance?
Yeah, like a lot of careers, there's a lot of happenstance about these things. You know, you don't always necessarily plan out your career, and somehow things kind of work in funny ways. I am trained as an economist. I worked as an economist for many years before I joined DFID. At DFID, it just so happened that I worked first as an economist, but then was drawn into working on our Pakistan program, and I was encouraged to move across from being an economist to working as a generalist, as a manager, as a leader. And I guess I was lucky enough to find a couple of people in the organisation who saw some potential and mentored me and encouraged me to develop my leadership capabilities and to take on those sorts of roles. I've always been interested in politics and kind of social affairs and political affairs, and international relations. So whilst I was an economist by training and profession, I always located that in a wider sphere. And that was that aptitude, that interest was a good basis, coupled with the formal training on the economics, to move across into wider kinds of roles. I guess my big sort of break, if you like, or the thing that really changed my career in many ways, was being asked to work as the principal private secretary, or the chef de cabinet to our Secretary of State, back in 2003. And in that role, I ended up working on all sorts of issues, not just kind of economic and trade and so on, but also worked a lot on conflict issues, country issues, humanitarian issues. And what I came to realize in that role was that the issues that most regularly hit the desk of our cabinet minister were the issues at the sharpest end, and those were where people's lives were on the line. There was a humanitarian disaster, there was conflict, that development prospects were hampered by some form of emergency. And further analysis that we've done thereafter, after working as the PPS, I ended up leading a white paper team that produced the 2006 UK White Paper on International Development. And one of the central elements in that white paper was that, on the basis of our analysis, we understood that the future of poverty around the world would be focused in fragile states. And since then, Paul Collier's published his book on the bottom billion and so on. But the common form in these analyses is that people who are going to be trapped in poverty as we head towards 2015, 2020 are increasingly in countries that are at risk of conflict, are in conflict, are recovering from conflict, and where the humanitarian side coexists alongside those conflict circumstances. Countries that are vulnerable to disaster. And for those reasons, I've come to believe, indeed, and it's a view that's increasingly shared in my organisation, that responding to humanitarian emergencies, but also dealing with conflict and vulnerability, whether climate risk related or conflict related, but dealing with those vulnerabilities as at the heart of how the UK thinks about development. And if our mission is to reduce poverty around the world, we can't do that without addressing issues around conflict and humanitarian assistance. But I think the other part to this for us is that we're very conscious of the limited impact that any one country can have in this day and age, no matter how powerful, no matter what the resources at our disposal. And therefore, when one's thinking about these big international problems, we believe, and we believe that the evidence and experience, certainly of the last 10 years, bears this out, that we need international responses. And therefore, this is not just about how the UK works in this area, but also how we work as part of the international community and how we strengthen the international system in order to be able to respond effectively to people's needs at the sharpest ends of the sharpest problems in our world.